Hey up everybody, welcome back to the I'll Do Cycling YouTube channel, where today I am going to be talking about the Velogames Tour of Flanders. So how this is going to work is I am going to first go down through this list of riders in front of us, and then at the end I am going to give you 3 team options that you can go with. Of course, if you are new around here and you like Velogames or just fantasy cycling in general, then please consider subscribing. It would be great if we could try to get up towards 500 subscribers, that'd be pretty cool. But anyway, let's go and have a look at the riders that we've got in front of us. So the most expensive ones are Wout van Aert and Tadej Pogačar, and just behind them is Mathieu van der Poel. So Pogačar is an interesting one, incredibly talented, incredibly good, and even at his debut at Dwars Vlaanderen he came in 10th place. So that is really good, really promising sign. His positioning is a bit weird, not great going into the couple sections, but I do think that he is still a good pick. He could still win this race. Of course, Wout van Aert is likely not to take part in this race, which is a shame really, but if Wout van Aert does compete in this race, I would certainly consider putting him on. When you remember back to 2017, Sagan came back from illness and then won the 2017 World Championships even after being ill, so if Wout van Aert does something similar, it really wouldn't surprise me. You've then got Mathieu van der Poel, who would be my strongest recommendation for you to put onto your team. He is really good at this race. If you look back at his last few results at this race, I think his lowest finishing is like 4th or something like that in the last 3 years, so incredibly consistent. I'd say that Mathieu van der Poel is probably the best rider that you can put onto your team, and I expect a lot of people to put him on. Casper Asgreen and Tom Pidcock. Those are some interesting names because both of them could certainly win this race, but both of them haven't had the greatest results going into this. Pidcock, of course, has had a stomach problem. Asgreen has just, shown good legs, but perhaps just missed the winning moves. But I still think that both of them are really solid picks, and I don't think that I can floor you picking them. 24 pointers, arguably, probably not some of the greatest picks that you can have. Lampaert, Philipsen, Stuyven, Van Avermaet, probably not great. Pedersen, likely going to be your best option here. Just because if it's going to be cold and snowy, like apparently it's going to be forecast to be, well, I'm not sure it's going to be snowy, but it's definitely going to be cold. Pedersen is likely going to be your best man there. I'd say maybe Lampaert and Stuyven coming just behind them as potentially kind of wild card options for the day. They could certainly spring a surprise. 22 pointers, I think that Seneschal's your best, just because if you think back to the last few results of Seneschal, yes, they don't look great, but he was actually in that winning move at E3 before getting a puncture, so he was in good form then. And then he crashed out against Velogames. So actually he could have very good legs, it's just that we haven't seen the results from him. So I wouldn't completely write Seneschal out of your team selection just yet. 20 points, some good options here, including Tiege Benoot, Christophe, Laporte and Mohoric. The rest of them I don't think are that great. I certainly think that Laporte, after his second place at E3 and Gent Velogames, is going to be an incredibly popular pick. Mohoric is looking really good, especially over kind of long distance races. Benoot is also a great option, especially if Wout van Aert isn't going to be there. He'll likely be co-leader with Laporte. And Christophe is very consistent in this race, regularly kind of doing good in the bunch sprint, kind of behind for kind of like 5th place. So I think that all those are pretty good options. Best 18 pointers, Turgis and Van Baal. Of course, both came top 10 in this race last year. Both have had some good results this year as well. So I think that both of them are equally very good. I couldn't really split them. I just think that they're both good options, better than all the others. 18 pointers for sure. Your best 16 pointers are the FDJ duo of Stefan Kung and Valentin Madouas, who I said and recommended for you to put onto your Dwars Vlaanderen teams. I do think that Kung is just about the better of the two, just because of how good he's looked this year. He's looked incredibly strong, and I just think out of the two he is the most likely to win from like a solo attack because of his time trialing ability. He's also very good in the cold and the wet, so just bear that in mind for Sunday, which is likely to be a day kind of similar to that. Best 14 pointer, I think that Heinrich Hausler possibly is your man there. Maybe Mike Turnison, because he might get given a bit more leadership with Wout van Aert not being in the race. Best 12 pointers, Stan de Wolf, Marco Haller, Rasmus Tiller, maybe Connor Swift if you're feeling quite Yorkshire. But arguably, I'm not a massive fan of any of those. Neither of them have particularly stood out to me as great, in great form at the moment. I do think that what you're better off doing is saving 2 points and putting on Victor Campenaerts. The beauty of the Super Classico is that the points are set for the riders at the start. Campenaerts, if I was to set his price now, I'd say he'd easily be a 16-point rider. but he is actually at 10, so therefore he's incredibly good value, probably one of the best value for money riders that you can get right now, and he's certainly the best 10 pointer by far. I'd say that likely Fred Wright is the second best 10 pointer out there. 8 pointers, again, a bit light on the ground, maybe Tobias Haaland Johannesson coming off of a very good Volta a Catalunya. Jonathan Navarez looked good at E3, he came 5th there, and that's generally a really good indication of when somebody will do well at the Tour of Flanders, is when they do well at E3. Casper Asgreen is a great example of that from last year. I think Nicky Terpstra won it as well before he went, and then on to win the Tour of Flanders. Other than that, 8 pointers aren't too great. With your best 6 pointers, there are quite a few that I could choose as like some long shots, maybe like Lewis Askey, but arguably your best one is Jan Tratnik, weirdly enough, after a very strong performance at Dwars Doors, but he also did good at Milano San Remo, came 9th there as well. Alexis Goujard regularly gets him a breakaway. Johan Jacobs, again, gets him a breakaway quite a lot, and he's looked really strong recently. I.E. Livens could be a good one as well. Matthias Louvel is a good cobbled rider for Arkea. He came top 20 in Dwars Doors and also Omloop Het Nieuwsblad earlier this year. Joris Nieuwenhuis, weirdly enough, one of the better riders that DSM have in this race. I wouldn't be counting him out from getting the top 20, say, in this race. Jonas Ruch can sometimes go and surprise in some kind of questionable conditions out there. Jan Tratnik is, of course, right there. Taco van der Horn for getting him a breakaway. He does love a breakaway after all. And I do think those are your best 6 pointers. Your best 4 pointers are weirdly towards the bottom. So you've got Jonas Wiedeberg, very good at Volta a Catalunya, got him a breakaway an awful lot of times. And I do think that he could survive quite far if he got into the breakaway in this race. Looking very strong at the moment. Strongly recommend putting him on if you want. But you also have Ben Turner, probably the best 4-pointer out there. If I was to price him at the moment, he'd probably be about 8 points. 8th place at Dwars Doors, top 30 at E3, and at Gent-Wevelgem. Likely to finish top 30 as well at the Tour of Flanders. I think that Ben's probably the best one that you can have on your team, and then Julian Vermote would be another one that I'd recommend if you needed a third one, because he could get assist points from Mathieu van der Poel. So now that I've gone through all the riders, let's talk about the 3 team kind of options that I want to give to you. So option number 1 is what we have on screen, which is you go with 3 of the big riders: Mathieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert, Tom Pidcock. Of course, this is a team that you'd pick if Wout van Aert is competing. If he isn't, then of course you could put in Tadej Pogacar. The beauty of this is that you're just picking all the favourites and you don't have to worry about it. Just absolutely fire and forget. And then you have the 3 4-pointers that I recommend at the bottom, and arguably these are all some very good 4-pointers. Your downside of this team is that you don't have that kind of depth in your team, so you don't have like 5 riders who could finish inside the top 10. You only really have 3. But you know, if you just wanted all the favourites, then by and large just go and do that. If you wanted to spread it out a bit more, say Wout van Aert isn't competing in this race, you could put on another 26 pointer in Casper Asgreen if you wanted him on. Use those 6 points that you saved and put them likely onto either Vermote or Wiedeberg and get yourself Victor Campenaerts. I think this is a really strong team. It gives you 4 riders instead of 3, and I think that's an incredibly strong team. I do expect to see quite a few of the top teams in the world using something very similar to this. It gives you Van der Poel as the favourite, Asgreen and Pidcock who are like second favourites, and Campenaerts who look really good at Dwars Doors Vlaanderen. 10 points, you really can't go wrong there. If you wanted a third team that you could go with, it spreads out a little bit more. You could take off Casper Asgreen and Tom Pidcock and choose 2 20-pointers instead. My best ones, I think, are Christophe Laporte and Matej Mohoric. Of course, you could pick Benoit or Christophe or just any other 20-pointer that you like, but then you're going to invest those points and put them into Wiedeberg, more than likely, and get yourself a 16-pointer in the form of Stefan Kung, because likely he is a bit better than Valentin Madouas, and this is the team that you could go with. It's really good just because it gives you 5 riders who could finish inside the top 10. Then you also have Ben Turner who could definitely finish inside the top 30. So that is the final team that I have to recommend to you. Let me know what you think of them and which one you might go with in the comments down below. If you want to know who I am going to be selecting personally, then be sure to go and check out the link to the video, but I'll tell you exactly who I'm going to be picking. And yeah, all that's left to say is to keep safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video. Salut!